Hey, what's up guys, we're back in Anthem and today I'm going to bring you guys some crazy powerful and very fun build for the Colossus. This entire build is going to be centered around this Javelin's already very high combo damage output as well as its melee capabilities. With the ability and components combination that I'm about to show you, you'll be able to deal insane amounts of damage, have crazy amounts of survivability, and I believe out of all of the builds I've tested so far, this one is the most efficient even at lower power levels, which means you can move on to Grandmaster 2 and maybe even 3 much faster than other Javelins and builds can. But before moving on to the build itself, I want to first give a big shout out to Instant Gaming. Many of you already know this as I've mentioned it in previous videos, but Instant Gaming is a website where you can buy the latest games very cheap. There's always some big deals going on for both newest games and older ones, so follow the links in the description box if you want some very good discounts. But with that being said and done, let's move over to the build itself. I started using this build a few days ago, down from my regular 720 Colossus build that I had before that, and found the new one to be much better. Even though it was 60 points lower, it performed much better in terms of damage, in terms of survivability, and I could move to Grandmaster 2 much faster. Even Grandmaster 2 right now with 670 item level is a walk in the park. Now there are a handful of items that you will absolutely need for this build to work, and starting with the gear pieces in the heavy assault launcher slot, we have the ability called Solvent Green. It's basically the upgraded Venom Spitter, and you will need this one either in the Masterwork or Legendary version for the yellow bonus, and the version gives a staggering 200% bonus to combo damage while you equip this item. It's not even, needed to use this item itself. All you need is to have it equipped on your Javelin, and that's pretty much it. It's a central piece of the build, but you don't get to use it anyway because you just need the bonus from it. Then the second ability, which synergizes very well with the first one, is the Voltaic Dome in the Ordnance Launcher slot. Just like the previous one, we're looking for the Masterwork or Legendary variants for the added bonus, which in this case makes enemies to become frozen on hit, which also means they are getting primed in the process. This is the only spell in this build that will truly get to use, and its low recharge time gives us the ability to basically spam it. Do keep in mind that this isn't a toggle ability, which means that you will need to press and hold the ability button to make it work, so this only works for the Voltaic Dome, but since it's the only ability we'll get to use, it's not really such a big deal. Moving on to the components section, we first have Bloodlust. Since the build is all around melee damage, this provides a nice 30% melee damage at base and another 75% after you finish off an enemy. Realistically speaking, you'll constantly stay at 105 bonus melee damage since it's so easy to proc this bonus. Catalytic Overdrive is the second one, increasing our main source of damage, which is the combo damage, by 50%. The secondary bonus to ability damage isn't very needed here, though it's very welcomed as it provides a nice 40% buff, in this case to Voltaic Dome, so definitely very useful. And since Voltaic Dome is an electric damage, it means it will deal more damage to shields, making even shielded enemies unsafe towards your destructive capabilities. The third one is called Demolition Tribute, which is the core piece of our survivability. The yellow bonus causes enemies to restore 20% armor when defeated. This is a huge amount of heal considering you'll take groups of enemies at the same time. So out of all of the builds I've tried so far, I don't think I ever felt immortal with any of them except with this one. And even on Grandmaster 2, it's absolutely amazing. I never die, I'm never close to even dying, and even when I am, I just move on to the next group of enemies, do a huge ground slam, and I'm basically 100% full HP again. Then there's something called Shock Treatment, which we'll use mainly for its yellow bonus. In this case, taking damage increases all damage by 8% for 10 seconds, stacking to 10, and what this means is you only need to take damage 10 times to stack up to 80% additional damage for all of your sources. It can be 10 bullets, 10 melee hits, 10 sources of damage, whatever they may be, which means the uptime for this buff is very high. It only takes like 2 or 3 seconds to build it up in the beginning of the fight, and then you'll pretty much have it for the entire duration of the fight itself. So very good one to have and definitely needed. Symbiotic Surge is another important one despite being a universal component. There's a visual bug going on with these descriptions, but the armor bonus is much higher, and you also get a 50% all damage buff when picking up repair packs, and both in parties as well as in free play solo sessions you will get plenty of repair packs from fights, which means this is another easy buff that you will get a hold of for the vast majority of the fight itself. So you will almost never see it fall because there's always going to be some red packs on the ground for you to pick. Finally, there's also the grand entrance component, which sounds underwhelming at first, but it's actually one of the main sources of damage for your build. So the yellow bonus upon hard landing creates an explosion at the point of impact works extremely well with the Colossus ground slam. You don't actually need to fly up and then crash into the ground as the description might imply. It works by simply jumping a bit in the air and then pressing the melee attack to create that ground slam, and that will also proc this ability. This means that you can pretty much spam your ground slam, and every time you do so, this proc will also happen. And it's not just some small damage proc, it's actually half or maybe even more of your already existing melee damage. So for example, if you're pulling 50,000 melee slam, there's going to be another 25,000 on top just from the grand entrance fire explosion, totaling to 75,000 just from this alone. So it's very potent, it's very good. It's also noteworthy that this explosion also benefits from the previous all damage buffs from the other components, like for example from the Symbiotic Surge or Shock Treatment. So again, very good. At base it's only like 10,000, but if you stack those Symbiotic Surge and Shock Treatment buffs, you're gonna get it to 25,000 with ease, maybe even more. Again, very underrated component that synergizes so well with everything else in this section. And in fact, all of these components synergize very well with one another. I don't think there's even one of them that you can, switch with something else. They all give direct buffs to your main sources of damage, which in this case are combo and melee damage. So I don't think you can switch up anything in here, but go ahead and test it out and report back in the comment section. Finally, in the weapons category, I have a couple of recommendations for you. If you can get weapons with high bonus to armors, like for example these ones I have over here that give me 90% armor max bonus, then go ahead and use them. But don't go overboard and use completely useless weapons just because they have some good bonuses. Keep one of the weapons, especially the primary one, as a source of damage. It can be very useful against main bosses or other enemies that you can't finish off in one single melee ground slam. So for example, if there's a legendary turret, you will need a weapon to deal damage to its weak points, so keep that in mind. In my case, I kept the last stand legendary mauler as it had an amazing damage stat on it. Actually a couple of them, even though I had to sacrifice the 90% bonus armor, but I did keep a additional weapon with that as a secondary weapon, which I don't really use that often. But this is very useful against boss fights, against enemies that don't drop in one shot, for which you will need to deal weak point damage, so it's definitely useful. Keep this in mind because you want your build to be as adaptable as possible. Now, I was talking about stats, and the ones you'll be looking forward here are in this order: damage, melee damage, and finally armor max. I've seen some people having some really good rolls on their components, which meant they were dealing more than 250,000 per hit. Unfortunately, I wasn't lucky enough with the rolls on my universal components, which means I have very little bonuses to melee and combo damage, so I'm only pulling like 50,000 per melee hit, plus another 20 to 25,000 with the fire explosion, and then there's also the combo damage, which puts me way above 100,000 damage, and again, it could have been way higher, but for a 770 power level Colossus, which I've barely built a couple of days back, this is already amazing in itself, and I can do Grandmaster 2 with ease. Now, in terms of the playstyle, it's all very easy. You just need to charge in your nearest groups of enemies, hold down Voltaic Dome to freeze everything in sight, and then just do a ground slam to destroy everything. I can guarantee you that even the toughest enemies will get melted from all of that damage, and if you somehow get into trouble and get your HP severely damaged, you can just simply move on to the next group of enemies, obliterate everything in sight, and all of a sudden you will get back to 100% HP with ease. And you still have your oversight shield, by the way, and even more so the ultimate, which gets very easily charged because of the amount of combos, because of the amount of detonations that you're doing, as well as the number of primers you're applying to your targets. But yeah, that is it for now. Tell me what you think about this build, comment your experience down below, and in the meantime, you know what to do. Leave a thumbs up on the video if you enjoyed it, also subscribe for more Anthem content, and I'm going to see you guys next time.